brought to you by Pajama Pants.
Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in January. I read 8 books. First book I finished was Jade War, the second book in the Greenbone saga. I reread Jade City recently, November or December. I don't remember. So I reread Jade City because I had a copy of Jade War, and then my copy of Jade Legacy was going to be available soon from my library. So anyway, in this book we continue on with okay, I want to say the word legacy, but that's not the right word. We continue on with the story of the Call family, who are kind of they are kind of like a mafia family in the city of Janloon, but the dynamics of the great families in that country are different than like Western criminal mafia families. They're definitely more of a symbiotic relationship with the official government rather than like a underhanded criminal organization. So the pacing in this book is quite different. We definitely still get some great action, but it's not as action-packed the whole way through. We could see a lot more political maneuvering. An interesting development in this one is we see the livelihoods? No. We see the community of Kekanese immigrants living in Espania. So I enjoy that we got to see more of this world beyond just the island of Kikon. Things I still loved. I still love the relationship between Shay and Wen. There is something about the development of the female characters in this series. Like, all of the characters are fantastic, but there is just this really crisp understanding of the women in this society that, like, you know, we definitely see powerful women and women gaining power, and the society evolving to like have more women green bones, have, you know, more women business owners, but like they're still not quite seen as equal, and that is something that shapes these women and shapes the way that they interact with each other in a very distinct way. That I really enjoy reading. The way that, like, even when some of these characters don't like each other or aren't particularly emotionally close, they understand each other in a way that the male characters in this world would never understand them. So, loved it. I'm gonna keep it short because I finished Jade Legacy in this month too, and I have more thoughts when I get to that book. Okay. The next book I finished was Just One Damn Thing After Another, The Chronicles of St. Mary's, Book 1 by Jodi Taylor. So this is a time travel science fantasy. Basically, this is Doctor Who meets the Umbrella Academy, which is basically like very silly, or like somewhat silly, irreverent time travel shenanigans, but darker. And I took the note of, like, there are some moments where we do get quite dark, but it doesn't dwell on it. Like, there's definitely a lot of humor in this book. Oh my god, there was one scene that I need to. So very early on, this is like the very end of chapter 1, just to give you a setup of the tone of this book. There was a small bang from the second floor and the windows rattled. "Hold on," said Chief Farrell. "I'm duty officer this week and I want to see if the fire alarms go off." "They didn't." "Well, that's good, isn't it?" I said. He sighed. "No, it just means they've taken the batteries out again." So that kind of sets up the tone of, you know, you've got your mad scientists, you've got your people who love history and really want to go and physically experience things. So then the story of this that happens in this book is they realize that there is a bad guy who's part of, like, you know, a disgruntled organization that's trying to sabotage the work of St. Mary's, which is the organization that does this time travel research. So with their interfering, a catastrophic thing happens, and then our lead character kind of leads the charge to uncover what is happening and uncover the moles in their organization. And the ending of the book I thought was really clever in that it really sets up the potential of where the series goes. I think there's like at least like 9 books in this series. It might still be an ongoing series. And I would be interested in continuing on with it. It's like, it's not like a super high priority. And I get the feeling that this is the kind of book that the books are not going to be standalones, but like they are going to get you up to speed if it's been a while since you've been them. We'll see. I mean, I could be completely wrong in that, but I get the vibe that this is kind of a casual reading thing where, you know, if it's been 2 years since you read the last book, they'll kind of catch you up to speed of like, what important bits do you need to know for the current book that you're in. Okay. Then the next book I finished was Jade Legacy. I listened to part of this on audiobook and I didn't really love the audiobook narrator. Like, he was fine, but he was very monotone. And there was another audiobook that I was listening to around the same time that had a narrator that, actually another 2 that had narrators I really enjoyed. So some of it is suffering by comparison. But yeah, he was really monotone, which, I don't know, if you need to not be distracting by the acting, if you need to not be distracted by the acting choices of the audiobook narrator, it's fine. But we would be in like some really tense emotional scenes, and I would just like be I would just be getting nothing. I definitely prefer reading this book than the audiobook. Again, like, it wasn't bad, it's just clearly I prefer my fiction audiobook narrators to be very dynamic voice actors. So in this book, we're experiencing a lot more time jumps. Like, by the time the book ends, Hilo is in his like 60s. And I don't feel like the time jumps were done poorly, but I did have the thought of like, you know what, it feels weird for us to jump 5 years with like very little discussion. This doesn't feel like a world where 5 years could pass with like nothing of note happening in between. That doesn't feel like the world that we have been set up in the 2 books so far. I've heard other people like were not bothered by the time jumps at all, and it's like they weren't like super distracting. It was just like, it's a very interesting progression in the series where like the first book takes place maybe over a couple of months, the second book is over a couple of years, and the third book is over a couple of decades. And maybe that is quite intentional, but it just I don't know. I don't know what is the word equivalent of But also, like, there's a couple of, like, of course, Fonda Lee, she does these, I describe them more as, like, author twists rather than plot twists, because, like, there are some plot twists that you expect. For example, in the first book, there is a major death, which, this is a book where characters die, okay, but it was a choice to have that happen where it happened in the book. And I feel like the Jade Legacy also does this thing where a major event will happen, and it's like, this feels like this should be the end of the book. What is this happening only a third of the way through the book? Like, where the fuck is, like, you made this decision to kill this character, spare that character, especially like the third major twist, where I definitely saw her setting up your line of thinking and then just absolutely slicing it out from under you. which like is like, oh my god, tear my heart out and trample all over it and then feed it to me. But you know, in a good way, in the way that you want from like a very juicy fantasy world. So definitely be prepared to get to certain parts of the book and then just like want to throw it across the room and just be like, you did not just do that. And again, like it feels like for the world, it makes sense that this such a thing would happen. But like that feels like the end of the book. And now you got two full acts to go. Where are you going to go from here? So, that is what a ride and what like a fantastic conclusion to the series. And I look forward to getting some hard copies of book 2 and 3 in the series and being able to reread it and recommend it and share it with people. Okay, the next book I picked up was The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. So this is a story about a young woman who desperately needs to find a very affordable place to live, and she ends up doing a flat share arrangement where she moves in to a 1-bedroom apartment of this guy who is a night shift nurse. So basically, she gets the apartment from like 6 o'clock in the evening until 8 o'clock in the morning, and then he comes home from his shift and has the apartment during the day when he sleeps. So they actually go many months before they actually meet each other in person. Initially, this very lovely friendship develops with them communicating via post-it notes. And it's very interesting, just the way that each of their personalities is very quickly established, like not just in the post-it notes, but in like the writing style of the chapters. Like one of my initial notes was, I don't like the really like robotic wooden lack of pronouns style of the dude when we first meet him, but it kind of grows on me, and the text actually addresses that like this is very representative of his personality. He's very like unemotional and to the point and just direct, and we definitely see, you know, there's a correlation between like his emotional happiness and like how fleshed out his writing is in his chapters. So it was a little bit like, oh my god, is this going to be the whole book? But then like when I see that the author is doing this very intentionally, then I think it was actually a successful choice. I also love that these characters develop like this very full friendship before the romance blossoms. And there is a trigger warning for this book that the woman is still in the process of escaping a very emotionally abusive relationship. And we do see her ex come back into the picture and like stalk her and do like gaslighting on page. And there are some very stressful situations with her ex trying to regain control over her life. And I have heard some comments that people go into this premise in the story not realizing that there's going to be some potentially very like triggering scenes of like on-page interactions with this toxic person. So be forewarned that while there is like some lovely romance in this, what's really great about this is like the conversations around mental health and setting boundaries and seeing the progression of like mental health awareness and development of our characters, but it's not fluffy all the way through. I do think the conclusion of what happens with everyone is very satisfying, if a little heavy-handed, but also like for like a romance, it's like, yeah, you want that person to be absolutely destroyed by the end. Good job. Also, I really, really love our side characters and the side plots. There is a patient from our male protagonist who, you know, he was a World War II vet, and he, like, I think he got married and, like, had a family and everything, but he had a romance with one of his male soldiers, and there's kind of, like, this side quest to see if we can find, you know, the long-lost love of this old guy who's going through cancer treatment and doesn't really have long for this earth. And it's very sweet. But then, like, he also knits. And that actually ties into a plot point with our female protagonist who works for a book publishing company that focuses on books about crafts, like, woodworking and knitting and crocheting. So I love that we have these side characters, and I love that the stories of the side characters interact with each other. And it's a very fleshed out world. Like, I had an initial thought of like, oh my god, our female protagonist has more than one friend. Like, I feel like for like a rom-com or like a romance, like everyone usually gets like one friend. And like, that's it. One friend and your mother. And the extra cast of characters was quite well fleshed out in this, and I was very surprised in it. Not as steamy as I prefer some of my romances, but like I was just surprisingly invested in the story. Huzzah. So the next book I finished was Death Masks by Jim Butcher. This is the 5th book in the Dresden Files series, and this one I completely listened to on audiobook because I learned that the narrator for this series is James Marsters, who is the actor who played the character Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And let me tell you, he is such a fantastic narrator. I think it's probably because he's an actor, So again, like I was talking about earlier, like he's got a very dynamic vocal range in doing various voices, in doing the various emotions. It's like listening to an audio play, not just somebody reading a book to you. So that was fun, and I will absolutely be continuing on with this series via audiobook. Fuck yeah. So this is a series that I had read like up until book 11 many years ago. So I'm slowly like kind of reading my way back through them. I kind of took a break from them because especially like the initial books they're kind of dated in the way that they like portray our main character's relationship with women and etc. But so I kind of just like took a break from the series and came back to this one. I was just kind of like in the mood for it, and yeah, this is this is one like I listened to at work a lot when I was doing like a lot of warehouse inventory. So this was a great thing to be listening to at work during times when I was kind of like just working by myself and just needed to like help fill the void. Yeah, this book really starts off hitting the ground running. Like within like the first 2 chapters, we've got vampires, we've got someone coming to Harry Dresden for help, we've got like the local mafia boss sending assassins after our dude, and then within another couple more chapters, we also have fallen angels and holy knights pursuing a stolen holy artifact. There's a lot going on, but I think that this book series really does a good job of catching you up to where we are in the series when it's been a while since you've read the last book. I think it's been, I don't know, maybe like 6 months since I read the last book. I think the way that this author catches you up is not like a repetitive info dumpy chapter, but it is like as we are introduced to a character we've met before, we get a small reminder of why does so-and-so's wife not like Harry, and what was the last conversation Harry had with this person, and just kind of like jogging your memory. And that's what it is. It's like, it's not rehashing everything that's happened before, it's jogging your memory of a book that presumably you've already read. And if you haven't read it, at least like giving you an idea of like what kind of relationship does Harry have with this person or with the situation. We actually see some character development with Harry regarding the way he treats Karen. Karen is his contact. Okay, what's the premise? Just in case. Harry is Chicago's professional wizard, and it's kind of a, he's like kind of a private investigator, bounty hunter, kind of, urban fantasy type story. And he's, the local wizard who investigates mysterious happenings. and Karen is his liaison with the Chicago Police Department in their Special Investigations Unit. And in the past, he has this repeated bad habit of wanting to protect her, because that's kind of like his, you know, character flaw, is he's far too chivalrous around women. Like, go ahead and call him a misogynist pig just because he wants to protect women. The tone, that kind of like conversation is quite toned down in this one comparatively. So we'll see if the rest of this, if the series progression sticks with that. But anyway, in the past, Harry has had this problem of not telling Karen relevant information because he's worried that it'll put her in danger, or that, like, you know, if he's just trying to keep her out of it to keep her safe. And this time we have an interaction where, you know, he's under like a confidentiality clause, like he really can't legally tell her what's going on, but he recognizes that, like, I mean, this is her job and this is part of like them trusting each other, and he finds like a little loophole of like, I would tell you to go investigate the recent theft of such and such artifact. You know, like, he's not telling her exactly what's going on, but he's trying to not have her be blindsided about what's going on. And that is quite a character shift for him. And I love to see it. I also really appreciated that at least twice in this book, his, like, chronic underestimating of women literally comes to bite him in the ass. It's like, yeah, if you think this woman is too injured and, like, not able to fight, even though you literally just saw her, like, kick some demon's ass, and then, like, you turn your back on her, like, of course she's gonna smack you over the head and knock you unconscious. Like, honey, you've been here before. Like, at this point, you kind of deserve it. And, like, that happens, I think, twice. And, like, I mean, I don't really want to say I enjoyed seeing our hero, like, get knocked out and taken advantage of, but also, like, it was clearly, like, his own fault, and I felt like the tone of the book was like, yup. Okay. If, you know, being overly chivalrous is his character flaw, like, at some point it needs to actually, like, not serve him well. So, I think that's an encouraging, I think it's an encouraging depiction. And again, like, we'll see how things like that progress in the series moving forward. But anyway, this was fun. And I've got the audiobook for the next one checked out. So that's probably something I will get to by the end of February. The next book I finished was The Secret Commonwealth. This is The Book of Dust, Volume 2. This is a companion series to Historic Materials, the most famous book being the first book, The Golden Compass. So in this series, Book 1 follows Lyra when she is a baby during the Great Flood that ends with her having sanctuary at Jordan College. This book takes place like 11 years later. Let's see, so Lyra in this book is 20, and then we are also reunited with Malcolm Polstead, who is the boy who helped her in the first book of this companion series. This was really interesting. This is definitely a series that grows up with its readers and grows up with its characters. I mean, I've made the comment to some people who, like, read The Golden Compass and they're like, I don't know, it's just like this cute middle grade. And I'm like, the rest of the series is not middle grade at all. And, no. No. Like, definitely the Amber Spyglass is not something I would recommend for anyone, like, under the age of 14. I mean, every reader needs to make that judgment for themselves, but, like, the rest of the world is a very different tone from the writing of The Golden Compass. And even, like, Book 1 in this, when Malcolm Polstead is 11 years old, is a very different tone than what we see in this book when the characters are adults. But, so anyway, so Lyra is 20, and there's a huge conflict with her and her demon, Pantaleimon, about, like, how she has changed, and how, like, basically a point of conflict is, like, Pan criticizes her for, like, you've lost your imagination. Someone has stolen your imagination. Like, what's wrong with you? And so like we see these like vast emotional changes with Lyra, but somehow like she's still very familiar. Like we still see her pride and her cleverness, and her determination that we've seen in the other books when she was not a literal infant. So it's very familiar to like see how this character has grown up and still have this character be very recognizable to the way that we've been presented this character before. So this series, especially like this book, it's like a fantasy mystery, but it's not a whodunit. It's a how are all of these elements tied together? So it's like we've got things going on with Lyra, we've got, you know, the interrupted trade of this very expensive rose oil. We have, you know, new political developments in the magisterium, which is code for the church. We've got, you know, violence in the Levant area of the world, which is like the Middle East, kind of Iran, Afghanistan area. And all of these things, you know, that there's, you know, a murder that gets witnessed, and all of these things are connected. And I didn't realize that this was going to be a trilogy. For some reason I thought it was just going to be a duology, but oh no, we've only started to see how these elements are connected, and it kind of leaves on a cliffhanger of like, what is going to happen? What, like, we are kind of starting to see, you know, that there is a man behind the curtain. Metaphorically, I don't think it's necessarily one person, but I still felt like we still really don't know what's going on, and I am very intrigued to see where the series goes, and we do not yet have a release date for book 3. So, this book also has a lot of current relevant themes, again, like the rise of religious political influence, both in Western countries and like Middle Eastern Western countries. There's a lot of reflection in here about refugees. Like we clearly are seeing that this author has been influenced by the refugee crisis from like Syria, like of the refugee crisis that has been ongoing in Europe, coming out of you know, fleeing conflicts with ISIS and the Taliban. Yeah, I do like that we see new parts of the world. I do like that we see just like how relationships with demons are different in different parts of the world, and how like the concept of spirituality and even like people's like relationships with their demon are changing with the times. So it's interesting to see how much this book is a reflection of like a lot of philosophical crises that are happening in our own time. One thing that I didn't love was there was a point where Lyra arrives at a town that I think is like in the equivalent of Turkey, and you know, we see like the militant you know, government officials who are very much like harassing people all the time, and it's clearly like a very unstable and dangerous place. And like she makes this comment of like, this is a terrible place, and it didn't really sit well with me, because it's like, is it a terrible place, or is it a place currently being managed by terrible people? Which is very different. And I think part of that is I was in the middle of reading Lolita in Tehran, which I didn't finish in January, and I'll talk more about it in my February wrap-up. But that one is it's partially a memoir of a woman who's living through the Iranian Revolution, and then the rise of Islam as a political government in Iran in like the 80s and 90s, and the way that, and it was just such a contrast of somebody talking about violent conflict in their home as opposed to an outside observer talking about violent conflict that he has clearly never experienced. And I feel like I really need to reserve judgment on this until I see how the story wraps up. But I feel like that was a point where I'm like, I see you trying to address the impact of, you know, this global violence is on, like, your perception of the world, but there's a little bit of white saviorism going on of, like, it feels like the surface level is, like, you know, look at how uncivilized and how unstable they are compared to the rest of us, but also, like, the thing that is causing their destabilization is, like, the rise of power in the magisterium that, like, has its headquarters in, like, Western Europe. So maybe it's like the commentary he's trying to make is something that I actually really enjoy, but I'm just not really on board with how it's executed yet. It's got a lot of layers, which I do really like, and I do like it that it's making me think so much. But I think definitely because the story is still has such a long way to go, I'm gonna reserve, like, again, final thoughts until the conclusion of the series. And you know, there is the pause of, like, the words that come out of a character's mouth are not necessarily exactly the same as what an author personally thinks, and I do want to be wary of not conflating those two. So I just need to think about it more. But yeah, it's a solid continuation of the series that I do think really adds something more to this world. Okay. The next book I finished was the audiobook of Dead Witch Walking, which is the first book in the Hollows series. So this follows I never remember these characters' names. A woman who is a witch, magical bounty hunter. It takes place in Cincinnati. Totally different city than what I was thinking. But basically, this is the Dresden Files with a female protagonist. Just, I mean, we've got, you know, kick-ass, sex appeal, magical lead in a gritty, large city, but not something so iconic like Los Angeles or New York. She's got, you know, snappy sidekick, and a cast of, you know, some human, and, you know, a cast of, like, other recurring side characters. There's even a part where, like, she does something with her magic, and she has the line of, "Damn, I'm good." And I'm like, that's literally, like, a Harry Dresden-ism. The whole, like, sometimes I'm fucking good at my job. So it's just funny that, like, tonally it's so exact. And let's see. The first Dresden File book came out in 2000, and Dead Witch Walking was first published in 2004. So anyway, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just, like, that's a type of pulpy genre that's popular. So of course there's going to be a lot of similarities, but especially in the first book, it's like, clearly the first book definitely has not aged well. There is a conflict with our protagonist and her eventual vampire roommate and business partner that very much feels like an association of queerness and predatory sexuality, just the way that it comes off in the first book. But this is a series that is still ongoing. And this was recommended to me by a coworker who has kept up with the series, and I, like, went and talked to her and was like, does the homophobia vibe get better? And she's like, oh yes, absolutely. It gets cleared up in that it's not a gender thing, it's a power thing, because vampires can kind of, you know, put a mortal person into a thrall. So there's always this question of, you're never really gonna know if, like, your attraction to this person is consensual or coerced. And as the series goes on, that gets explained and presented much more clearly. So I'm glad I was able to, like, bounce that off of someone who has kept up with the most recent books. And so this might be a series I continue with. I think I'd give it a couple more books. I weirdly I like her pixie sidekick. I thought he was very well presented. Him and his wife were just like very well rounded out characters. And I think I really enjoyed the narrator's voices for those characters. There were some other voices where I was just like, interesting choice with that character. Okay. I mean, at least those voices are distinct, so I can tell when one character's talking versus another. Yeah, definitely like the presentation of the pixie characters I thought was like the most interesting. I do want to read the next book, at least like in an ebook format, not audio, because I think I lose a lot of the world building in audio because I'm usually also doing something, so my attention is a little bit distracted. So I felt like there would be moments where I'm like, okay, I totally lost who you were talking to, who gave you this tip, and I totally lost, like, why did you end up in this building doing this? So I do want to do, like, a mix of, like, so I do want to, like, at least do the next book reading it, which I don't really have a choice because my library doesn't have the audiobook of book 2, but they do for book 3. I don't know. But yeah, I don't feel as strongly about this one as I do about the Dresden Files, but part of the Dresden Files is nostalgia aspect for me. But I am game to give this series a couple more books and see if this is another, you know, action magic series that I will continue reading. And the last book I finished on the last day of January was The Cardinals Blades, which is the first book in a trilogy that's basically described as the Three Musketeers plus dragons. And that is a very accurate description. Does the Three Musketeers have Cardinal Richelieu? Richelieu? I don't know, French names. I'm going to try my best. But anyway, but yeah, there's very little magic in here. Like, we do have dragon characters. And like they have a little bit of magic, but it's mostly political machinations and really fucking awesome sword fights. I was also getting kind of like Witcher vibes. Excuse me, phone. I was also kind of getting like Witcher vibes. Again, but like with less magic, but more of a like, we're slowly getting like different pieces of what's happening in the world and learning how everything comes together. And again, like really awesome fight scenes. Like I could really see this series being turned into a show with kind of like the tone and design aesthetic of the Witcher TV series. I think like tonally they're quite similar. I do wish there was a cast list. I did actually start writing down all of our names just so I could keep them straight. The characters are pretty archetypal. Like it's like an ensemble cast of the Cardinals Blades are like this specialty ops assassin investigative team that is overseen by this cardinal. You know, we've got like our trusty father figure leader. Who do we got? We've got like our pretty boy who's a really good sword fighter. We've got you know, the mysterious half-blood dragon guy who you know, we're never quite sure which side he's on. You know, a lot of these characters we've seen them before for the most part. You know, the characters aren't like completely flat in here, but I do think they're kind of helped along by them being familiar characters that if you haven't seen them in, you know, the Three Musketeers story, you've definitely seen them in other like ensemble type adventure stories. We do have a female musketeer, and I like that she is, what did I write down? She is forceful and commanding, but not an asshole. Like, she has a moment where she tells this guy, like, I don't need your help, and then realizes, like, okay, but, like, he's a soldier. It's literally his job to, like, make sure that I'm safe. So let me tell him who I am to help allay his concern about whether or not I'm going to be fine going into this, you know, barroom brawl. And, like, you know, she's not like, oh, apologies for my outburst. She's just like, I'm the person they're asking. She's just like, you don't know who I am, and that's not your fault. This is who I am, and now you understand what's going on. And, you know, we definitely see, like, the camaraderie of these characters, and then we are starting to see the elements of... So, see, what the story is the dragons kind of have this court of influence in Spain, and Spain is one of the potential, not rivals, potential enemies of France, and there's, like, some potential diplomatic ties, but then, like, the dragon court's kind of trying to sabotage it, and then, like, establish their own sphere of influence in France, so it's kind of, like, starting to uncover what's going on with that. But this is just the first in a 3-book series. Again, like, I don't know, the fight scenes in this were really awesome. I kind of want to compare it to the Greenbone saga, but, like, that's kind of where the comparison ends, is awesome fight scenes that my brain can very clearly picture, and I would love to see some kind of TV adaptation of it. Oh, and I should say that this is a French fantasy that has been translated into English, and I think it's only been translated fairly recently. And now when I look for bookstores, I have a hard time finding book 2 and 3 in bookstores, but I see a pre-order for a compendium of all 3 books that's going to be coming out soon. So if that sounds interesting, keep your eye out for that. You know, it's not the most well fleshed out fantasy series I've read, but it was absolutely fun, and I would love to see what happens next. Alright, that's it. That's a video. If you want to show me that you're here in the comments but cannot think of something to say, leave me a clock emoji or a watch or something, some kind of timepiece kind of image. If you have made it to the end of the video, you're a champ and you get to be rewarded with some bloopers. Bye! In January I read, I don't know, that, nope, we're gonna do that over that. Nope. I think, like, ta-da! Hold on. I'm losing a tab. Losing a tab! Let's go edit this bitch.